On a crowded flight from Philadelphia to Chicago, a single, icy command shattered the fragile calm that had briefly settled over the cabin. "My child needs the window seat, you have to move," declared Karen Whitfield, in a tone so cold it sent shivers down everyone's spine. Standing in the narrow aisle with an air of entitlement, Karen's steely eyes locked onto the young black student seated in 14C. A student whose name was now Jasmine Carter. Jasmine, with her backpack neatly by her side and a notebook filled with formulas and historical facts, was about to face a trial far beyond the academic challenge she had prepared for all her life. The announcement pierced the murmurs of other passengers who exchanged uneasy glances. Some sighed in resignation, while others averted their eyes, hoping to avoid the brewing storm. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if everyone instinctively knew that this was not going to be a simple misunderstanding. Jasmine had always prided herself on her calm determination, yet in that moment a heavy mix of dread and sorrow washed over her. She had looked forward to this flight as a quiet opportunity to focus on her studies, especially with the national academic competition looming. A contest that promised a prestigious scholarship and a chance to inch ever closer to her dream of attending Harvard University. Jasmine's heart pounded as she recalled the sacrifices made for her education. Her mother, a hard-working nurse who routinely put in extra shifts to support her aspirations, had shed tears of joy and worry when she learned about Jasmine's selection for the competition. And her math teacher, a mentor who had once wrapped her in a comforting embrace and urged her never to doubt her abilities, now seemed a distant memory as the present crisis unfolded before her eyes. Jasmine's determination to succeed had always been fueled by such support, yet nothing could have prepared her for the relentless cruelty that Karen was about to unleash. Karen's demand was not merely a request, it was an imposition delivered with a disdain that cut deep. "My daughter gets anxious when flying and needs to sit by the window to feel safe," Karen insisted, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, yet loud enough for everyone within earshot to catch the underlying threat. With every word, she wielded her authority like a weapon, her expression morphing into one of smug superiority. It was clear that Karen viewed Jasmine not as a young woman with dreams and struggles, but as an obstacle standing between her daughter's comfort and the sanctity of her own biased expectations. The conflict escalated rapidly. A heavy silence fell as the flight attendant, Michaela, an earnest young woman barely in her 20s but exuding a quiet confidence honed by years of managing delicate in-flight disputes, stepped in. "Good evening. I'm Michaela, the head flight attendant on this flight. How may I help you?" she asked in a calm, professional tone. Yet even as Michaela's words attempted to restore order, the tension in the cabin only deepened. Karen's eyes narrowed as she repeated her grievances, her voice tinged with an unyielding malice. "This girl refuses to switch seats with my daughter," she declared, her tone simultaneously accusatory and incredulous. "I just don't understand how a student can be so heartless." Jasmine felt the weight of every gaze in the plane, each pair of eyes silently weighing her worth against Karen's inflated sense of entitlement. It wasn't just that Jasmine had booked her seat in advance to have a peaceful environment for studying. It was that every time she tried to assert her right to that space, the world seemed to conspire to paint her as the villain. The unjust comparison was laid out plainly. A black student standing up for her own rights was immediately labeled as uncooperative and unfeeling, while Karen's demand to cater to her daughter's nervousness was portrayed as a noble, if misplaced, act of maternal care. Throughout the confrontation, Karen's cruelty only grew more pronounced. With a disdainful sneer, she glanced at Jasmine's notebook as if it were an affront to her refined sensibilities. "If your homework is so important, maybe you should ask the flight attendant to swap with someone else," Jasmine responded steadily, her voice trembling only slightly as she tried to keep her composure. It was as if Jasmine's quiet resistance had awakened a deep-seated fury in Karen. The middle-aged woman's eyes flashed with contempt, a look Jasmine had seen before in upscale boutiques, in classrooms where she had been dismissed by indifferent teachers, and on the streets of affluent neighborhoods where she had long felt like an outsider. As the minutes passed, the situation became even more charged. Karen's tone shifted from haughty entitlement to bitter accusation. "Are you really saying that the comfort of a child doesn't matter more than a young woman's need to study?" she challenged, her voice rising and echoing off the cabin walls. Each word was laced with cruelty, designed to shame Jasmine into submission. Meanwhile, passengers whispered among themselves, torn between a desire to remain neutral and a deep, unspoken empathy for Jasmine's plight. Their discomfort was palpable, as if each person present felt the sting of injustice on their own skin. Michaela, maintaining her professional poise, reviewed the seating arrangements on her tablet and confirmed that Jasmine was indeed in her assigned seat, 14C. "Ma'am, according to our policy, all passengers have the right to sit in the seat they have reserved unless there is an emergency," she explained firmly. But Karen was not one to accept a simple no for an answer. Her voice turned sharper as she demanded, "Are you sure? It seems to me that a young girl with special needs should be given priority over someone who merely wants to study." The remark was not just a challenge to policy, but a calculated attempt to tarnish Jasmine's character, portraying her as cold and unyielding in the face of a child's distress. Jasmine felt a mix of anger and profound sadness as Karen's words sank in. Each slight, each insinuation of selfishness cut deeply, reinforcing the painful reality of a world that was all too ready to judge her on the basis of her skin and her quiet defiance. Despite the growing storm of emotions inside her, Jasmine held her ground, her fingers gripping the edge of her notebook as if it were the only anchor in a sea of hostility. She knew that this was more than just a dispute over a seat. It was a microcosm of the larger, relentless battles she had fought all her life. Battles where her determination was met with prejudice and cruelty. Karen, clearly unwilling to accept defeat, tossed her perfectly styled blonde hair and shot one final venomous look in Jasmine's direction before grabbing her daughter by the hand and marching toward the rear seats of the plane. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath, the word echoing like a curse in the confined space. As she left, the air seemed to hold its breath for a moment, the conflict unresolved but leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. In the moments that followed, the cabin slowly began to exhale. Passengers returned to their seats, though the charged energy lingered in the air like a stubborn fog. Jasmine sat there, feeling as though the entire weight of the world was pressing down on her, yet her resolve remained unbroken. She tried to focus on the pages of her notebook, though the numbers and equations blurred into insignificance under the strain of her emotions. The painful memory of the encounter gnawed at her, a reminder of the endless struggle for dignity and respect in a society that often judged too quickly and too harshly. Just then, a soft, unexpected laugh from beside her managed to pierce the gloom. Jasmine looked up slowly and noticed a young man in seat 14B who had been quietly observing the ordeal. He was tall, with an attentive gaze that suggested he had been moved by what had just transpired. His smile was gentle, a silent gesture of solidarity that offered Jasmine a small measure of comfort amid the cruelty of the moment. In that brief exchange, as the young man's kind eyes met hers, Jasmine felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of relentless adversity, kindness and understanding could still be found. This flight, which had begun as a simple journey between two American cities, had unexpectedly become the stage for a deeply personal struggle, one that pitted a young woman's right to dignity against the callous demands of prejudice. Jasmine Carter, with her dreams and aspirations, was forced to confront not only the challenges of a high-stakes academic competition, but also the harsh realities of a world that often judged her by the color of her skin rather than the content of her character. And though Karen Whitfield's cruelty had left scars that were slow to heal, the quiet heroism of Jasmine's steadfast resolve shone through, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt marginalized or misunderstood. In that cramped airplane cabin, amid whispered sympathies and shared glances of disbelief, a small but significant battle had been waged. A battle for respect, for empathy, and for the recognition that every human being deserves a fair chance to pursue their dreams, no matter how imposing the forces of bias and cruelty may seem. As the plane continued its journey toward Chicago, Jasmine's thoughts lingered on the painful encounter, each moment a poignant reminder of the uphill struggle that lay ahead. Yet, in the soft kindness of a stranger's smile and the quiet strength of her own heart, she found the courage to press on, determined to overcome the odds and to honor the sacrifices that had brought her to this very moment. And so, as the flight carried on through the vast American skies, Jasmine Carter resolved to hold her head high, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. She silently vowed that no matter how many times she was forced to fight against injustice, her spirit would remain unbroken. In that shared moment of understanding with the young man beside her, and in the supportive memory of her family's love and her teacher's words, she found solace. Though the echoes of Karen Whitfield's harsh words would continue to haunt her, they also steeled her determination to succeed. Against every unfair odds, against every whispered insult, and against a world that too often forgot the simple truth that compassion and resilience are the most powerful forces of all. Marcus Green had a handsome face and neatly styled hair that fell into place in a naturally tousled way. His eyes sparkled with a warm humor that never came off as mocking, and when he leaned in slightly and said, "I've never seen anyone make a Karen back down while still keeping her professionalism," his tone was both admiring and conspiratorial. Jasmine Carter raised an eyebrow and asked, "What do you mean?" in that gentle, curious way that she had perfected over the years. Marcus explained that rarely had he witnessed a confrontation where a woman like Karen Whitfield, so used to wielding her authority with a cold, imperious edge, ended up losing face despite her usual unyielding demands. Even as his words eased the tension in the cramped airplane cabin, Jasmine could not shake the memory of the earlier encounter. She recalled how Karen had barked orders on the flight, demanding that Jasmine move from her reserved seat, treating her not as a fellow passenger, but as an inconvenience standing in the way of her daughter's comfort. Marcus extended his hand, his grip firm yet gentle, and introduced himself as Marcus Green. After a brief hesitation, Jasmine reciprocated with a handshake, introducing herself as Jasmine Carter. There was an immediate warmth between them, a shared understanding forged in the fires of past hardships and quiet defiance. Marcus, with genuine curiosity and respect, asked, "So, Jasmine, what brings you to Chicago?" His tone was friendly and caring, without an ounce of prying. Jasmine explained that she was competing in a national academic contest that held the promise of a scholarship to Harvard. The mere mention of Harvard made Marcus whistle softly in admiration. When Jasmine added that she was competing in history and mathematics, a combination of numbers and stories that both challenged and inspired her, Marcus nodded in understanding. He then shared that he too was heading to Chicago for a conference focused on educational equity and cultural diversity. His work involved discussions on how school policies often undervalued students of color, leaving many without the opportunities they deserved. In his words lay the bitterness of past experiences and the hope that sharing these struggles might someday lead to meaningful change. Their conversation flowed easily as they discovered a shared passion for learning and a mutual understanding of the pain of being underestimated. Jasmine recalled a teacher who had once told her, quite bluntly, that she should be more realistic about her dreams and choose a less challenging school. A remark that had stung deeply and left her feeling belittled. Marcus confirmed that he, too, had faced similar dismissals, where toxic praise masked a deep-seated belief that people like them were not meant for greatness. It was an invisible connection that brought a sense of solidarity to their exchange, a bond forged from the hardships of battling prejudice and the constant need to prove oneself in a world that often looked down on ambition from people of their background. As their conversation came to a natural pause, Jasmine's thoughts turned back to the day ahead. Chicago greeted her with a sky-tinted gray and a slight chill in the air that seeped into her bones. She tightened her light jacket around herself as she stepped out of the taxi, her eyes drawn to the grand building that housed the competition. The venue was a luxurious convention center, with imposing white columns and glass windows that reflected the vast cityscape, a modern palace of dreams and ambitions. Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to steady her pounding heart as she reminded herself that this contest was not only about academic prowess, it was her chance to rewrite the narrative of a life constantly burdened by doubt and discrimination. Inside the building, the atmosphere was as tense as it was charged with anticipation. Contestants milled about in small groups, their conversations subdued and filled with a mix of nervous energy and confident determination. They wore neat professional attire that spoke of years spent preparing for moments like these. Jasmine found a quiet corner, set her backpack on a chair and unzipped it to reveal a carefully organized stack of documents marked with blue underlines. Yet, as she tried to focus on her notes, her eyes involuntarily scanned the room, acutely aware of every subtle gesture and whispered conversation. And then, from across the room, her heart nearly stopped. There, emerging from the throng of competitors, was Karen Whitfield. The same woman who had caused so much distress on the plane now stood before her in the role of a judge, an embodiment of authority with an unmistakable air of cold calculation. Karen's elegant dress and meticulously styled hair complemented her high heels, which clicked sharply against the polished stone floor with every measured step. A name tag proudly displayed her title, Karen Whitfield, judge of the competition. In that moment, a cold chill spread from Jasmine's chest down to her fingertips. It was hard to believe that the very woman who had treated her with disdain on the flight was now one of the people whose decisions would determine the outcome of the contest. Jasmine's stomach churned as Karen's eyes briefly met hers, a look that was part recognition, part a calculated spark of danger. Karen smiled lightly, a smile that did nothing to mask the cruelty behind it. She walked slowly toward Jasmine, each step deliberate and laden with an unspoken threat, as if she were a predator closing in on her prey. "Young lady, how interesting to run into you here," Karen said in a calm yet icy tone that left no room for misunderstanding. "Quite a surprising coincidence, isn't it?" Her voice was measured, each word dripping with condescension and the promise of future torment. Jasmine forced herself to respond in an even tone, though inside she felt a surge of fear and anger. "Yes, it is a coincidence," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. Karen tilted her head, her eyes scanning Jasmine from head to toe as if weighing her worth, before saying in a voice that concealed as much as it revealed, "I hope today will be a better experience for you than last time." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Jasmine standing there with a sense of foreboding that chilled her more than the winter air outside. The lingering presence of Karen's threat loomed large as Jasmine made her way to the exam room. The room was vast, designed like a grand hall, with rows of long desks spaced evenly apart and cold white lights that illuminated every anxious face. Each contestant was provided with a tablet for the test, and at the front, a large stage allowed the judges to observe every detail. The atmosphere was electric, a blend of focused determination and the oppressive pressure of competition. Jasmine took her seat and glanced around at her fellow contestants, some sitting with confident, upright postures, others nervously flipping through notes or gripping the edges of their desks. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to forget the presence of Karen Whitfield, focusing instead on the exam ahead. A steady, calm voice soon filled the room, welcoming the contestants and outlining the rules. "Dear contestants, welcome to the first round of the competition. You will have 90 minutes to complete the exam covering topics from mathematics and science to history and data analysis. Stay calm, think carefully, and good luck." With a chime from the tablets, the exam began. Jasmine adjusted her posture and quickly scanned the first question. Easy, she thought, determined to let her academic strength shine through despite the oppressive tension. Every answer she entered was a small act of defiance, a silent rebuke to the cruelty of Karen Whitfield, and every instance in her life where someone had judged her not on her abilities but on her appearance and background. Even as the exam progressed and the questions became more challenging, Jasmine's mind was partly occupied with the memory of Karen's biting words and the way she had made her feel so undeserving of success. The test was more than a measure of knowledge. It was a battlefield where Jasmine had to fight not only for a prestigious scholarship but also for the dignity that had been so callously stripped from her time and time again. In that vast, brightly lit hall, Jasmine Carter resolved that she would not let Karen Whitfield's cruelty define her. Every tap on her tablet, every carefully considered answer was a testament to her resilience and a promise to herself that she would not be broken by the prejudices that had haunted her for so long. Despite the lingering threat in Karen's smile and the oppressive memories of their earlier encounter, Jasmine clung to the belief that her hard work and unwavering determination would someday silence the voices of those who doubted her. As the minutes ticked by and the exam continued, the tension in the room mingled with a quiet, steadfast hope, a hope that, despite all odds, justice and recognition were still within reach. After what felt like endless moments spent answering the test questions, Jasmine Carter finally sensed a familiar, unsettling feeling that someone was watching her. She had practiced for months for this very moment, and now, halfway through the exam, she caught sight of Karen Whitfield's unwavering gaze from the judge's area. Karen's expression was stone cold as she rested her hand lightly on her chin, studying Jasmine with an intensity that spoke of hidden malice and a desperate need to see her falter. Even though Jasmine's heart pounded, she managed to steady herself, tightening her grip on her pencil and focusing on the numbers and data before her. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo the unspoken challenge Karen was silently issuing. A challenge to make even the smallest mistake that would justify all the cruelty Karen had in store. Jasmine pushed aside the prickling sensation of being scrutinized and dove back into her work. When the test screen finally flashed a message indicating that she had completed the exam, she took a brief moment to glance up without checking her answers. Deep down, she knew she had done well. The tension, however, did not vanish. Instead, it hung in the air like an invisible weight, a constant reminder of the ongoing battle between her and the relentless Karen. Soon after the exam ended, the names of the top 10 contestants were to be announced on the big screen in the hall. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat when she saw her name listed in second place. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in her accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that Karen's reaction would likely be one of barely concealed displeasure. Sure enough, as the names were read out, Karen Whitfield's polite smile did little to hide the tension etched on her face. Jasmine noticed the subtle clenching of Karen's hand and the quick, disapproving glance that lingered on her, as if Karen could not believe that the results favored someone like Jasmine. Karen's voice, when she finally spoke, carried an underlined sharpness as she congratulated the successful contestants. Yet, as her eyes briefly met Jasmine's, the message was clear. Karen was determined to see Jasmine stumble in the next round. However, scores are not everything, Karen said in a tone that was meant to sound measured, but felt more like a veiled threat. The next round will be a real challenge to see who truly deserves to move forward. Her words echoed in the hall like a warning, and every syllable dripped with a cruelty that made Jasmine's heart ache with both anger and sorrow. After the results, as Jasmine stepped out of the exam hall, a soft yet unmistakably firm voice broke through her troubled thoughts. "You did well, Jasmine," said Elizabeth Wells, one of the veteran judges whose presence exuded both warmth and strength. Elizabeth, with her slender figure and calm authority, had been watching the entire ordeal unfold. Her genuine tone was like a soothing balm for Jasmine's wounded spirit. "Thank you," Jasmine replied quietly, her voice tinged with gratitude but also laced with the lingering pain of all the bias she had endured. Elizabeth continued, her words soft yet carrying a sharp edge as she revealed a truth that Jasmine had long suspected. I have been observing all day, and I can tell you one thing. You have incredible talent, but there is also a clear bias happening." Her eyes flicked toward Karen, who was now engaged in conversation with a group of other judges, and then returned to Jasmine with a look of earnest sincerity. "I will not let that affect this competition. Keep doing what you have been doing, and remember that not everyone is like her." Those words, simple as they were, lit a spark in Jasmine's heart and reminded her that she was not entirely alone in this relentless fight. From a distant corner of the hall, Marcus Green, who had been observing every moment with keen eyes, sent a brief message to Jasmine: "Play fair." Although the message was short, Jasmine understood it perfectly. Marcus was reminding her that while some participants might not be playing by the rules, she needed to remain true to her own talent and integrity. With a deep, steadying breath, Jasmine resolved that no matter how hard Karen Whitfield tried to undermine her, she would not back down. She would fight with every bit of her intellect and perseverance. Despite the tension in the exam room and the lingering memory of Karen's cold, calculating stare, Jasmine's determination to succeed grew even stronger. The exam had been only the first battle in a long and grueling war that was more than just a test of knowledge. It was a fight for her dignity and the right to be seen for her true potential. As Jasmine stepped out of the grand hall of the conference center into the biting Chicago air, she could almost feel the chill seeping into her bones. Yet, in that moment, she was far too focused on the internal battle raging within her to notice the cold. The first round of the competition was over, and although she had done exceptionally well, she knew that the real test was only just beginning. Behind the polished facade of the academic contest lay hidden forces, unseen hands pulling the strings and setting obstacles in her path. Karen Whitfield was one such force, a woman who had made it abundantly clear that her intentions were not to foster genuine competition, but to ensure that Jasmine would never rise above the constraints of bias and prejudice. While Jasmine was still sorting through her tumultuous thoughts, a familiar and reassuring voice called out from behind her. "Do you have a minute?" It was Elizabeth Wells once again, now walking steadily toward her with an off-white envelope in hand. Her face, though calm, bore the unmistakable marks of seriousness and trust. "I have a special invitation for you," Elizabeth said, handing over the envelope with a gentle yet firm touch. Jasmine, her curiosity piqued, carefully opened the envelope and found an embossed card that made her heartbeat quicken. The invitation was for the Davenport Foundation Charity Gala, to be held at the Chicago Cultural Center at 7 p.m. This event was known as one of the most prestigious gatherings in the world of education, a place where leaders, scholarship donors, and influential judges would be present. For Jasmine, the invitation represented not only a chance to rub shoulders with those who could help open doors to a brighter future, but also a new battlefield where Karen Whitfield's influence would loom large. Jasmine's mind raced with questions. If Karen was one of the main judges and organizers of the gala, would she be there? What did this mean for someone who had already faced so much cruelty at her hands? Elizabeth's slight nod confirmed Jasmine's fears, and the familiar, heavy tension returned to her chest. "Yet," Elizabeth continued, her voice calm but resolute, "you do not have to attend if you do not wish to, but I think you should. Not only will this be a chance to impress those who can help you, but it will also show that you fear no one." Those words sparked a quiet fire inside Jasmine, a determination that she would not be intimidated by Karen Whitfield, or anyone else who sought to diminish her achievements. Determined not to face the gala alone, Jasmine pulled out her phone and texted Marcus Green. Their conversation was brisk and filled with unspoken understanding. "Marcus, you will not believe it, I just got invited to the Davenport Foundation Charity Gala and all the judges will be there," she texted. Marcus quickly replied, "Then you need an ally. Let me come with you." After a brief pause, Jasmine confirmed, "All right, but do not think of this as a date." Marcus's response was immediate and lighthearted. "Of course, this is just a strategic mission to deal with those who do not play fair." With that, Jasmine's smile returned, a smile that held both determination and a glimmer of hope. Later that evening, as Jasmine stepped out of the car and made her way toward the Chicago Cultural Center, she felt a surge of confidence amidst the storm of emotions. The building stood tall and magnificent under the warm glow of yellow lights. Marble steps led up to a grand hall where guests were already mingling, raising glasses of champagne beneath sparkling crystal chandeliers. Marcus appeared beside her, impeccably dressed in a black suit that provided a perfect contrast to Jasmine's deep blue dress. Together they stepped into a world that was as intimidating as it was alluring, a world where true power was distributed not by chance, but by the subtle interplay of influence and persuasion. Inside the grand hall, the air buzzed with conversation. Jasmine immediately recognized several prestigious figures from the academic world, major sponsors of scholarship funds, and influential judges who could change a young person's fate with a single handshake or decision. And then her eyes landed on a familiar figure at the center of it all, Karen Whitfield. Dressed in a sharp red dress that exuded authority and menace, Karen stood surrounded by a group of judges and sponsors who hung on her every word. As Karen spoke, her blonde hair was neatly styled into a bun, and her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room. When their eyes met, Jasmine felt the chill of Karen's scrutiny as if it were a physical force. Karen began to make her way through the crowd with deliberate steps that seemed to echo with purpose. Finally, she approached Jasmine. "Ms. Carter," Karen said in a tone that was both deceptively polite and laced with contempt, "I did not expect to see you here. Quite an interesting surprise." The emphasis on the word surprise was not accidental. It carried with it the insinuation that Jasmine did not deserve to be among these esteemed guests. The air thickened with the tension of their unspoken rivalry as Karen's sharp smile seemed to promise further hardship. Jasmine, standing tall and refusing to show any weakness, met Karen's gaze with quiet determination. In that charged moment, every eye in the room felt the bitter rivalry between the two women. A rivalry not born solely of personal dislike, but one that represented the wider struggle between prejudice and perseverance. The cruel smirk on Karen's face, combined with the authoritative tone in her voice, only deepened the sense of injustice that Jasmine carried within her. Yet, even as she felt the sting of Karen's derision, Jasmine also sensed that she was not alone. The quiet support of Elizabeth Wells, the encouraging words of Marcus Green, and the unspoken solidarity among those who recognized the unfairness of Karen's behavior filled her with a resilient hope. In that magnificent hall, as soft music mingled with the gentle murmur of conversation, Jasmine Carter silently vowed that she would fight every step of the way. No matter how much cruelty and prejudice Karen Whitfield unleashed, Jasmine would not be broken. Her determination was fueled by every slight, every hurtful word, and by the overwhelming support of those who believed that talent and hard work should be rewarded, not suppressed. And so, as the evening unfolded and the gala continued, Jasmine stepped forward into the world of power and privilege, ready to stand tall against those who would try to keep her down, her heart filled with both resolve and the gentle hope that even the coldest of hearts might one day be warmed by fairness and compassion. At the gala, when a well-dressed attendant announced the arrival of an important event, Karen Whitfield addressed Jasmine Carter in a tone that was both patronizing and edged with cruelty.
"Ms. Whitfield,"
Jasmine replied calmly, her voice steady and unwavering despite the turmoil churning inside her. Karen's lips curled into a mocking smile as she continued. "I guess you're very lucky. Not everyone gets the chance to be invited to a gala like this. You must have made quite an impression in the competition." Jasmine maintained her composure and answered with quiet assurance. "Yes, I think I did. I'm sure the judges saw my true potential." For an instant, Karen's eyes darkened, a flash of irritation passing across her face before she quickly recovered, nodding with an icy politeness. "Of course," she said, though her tone grew even colder. "Talent is only part of the equation. In competitions like these, what's more important is understanding how things really work." It was a veiled warning, a reminder that raw ability alone might not be enough to win. Jasmine understood the implication all too well, yet she did not falter. With a polite but firm smile, she responded, "I agree, and that is exactly why I am honored to be here. I believe that learning firsthand from experienced people like you will help me understand the real workings of this field." For a brief moment, Karen's expression froze, as if she had not expected such a sharp reply from someone she considered beneath her. Quickly, though, she recovered and flashed another smile, a smile that could barely hide her discomfort at being challenged. "It's good that you have such a mindset," Karen remarked in a voice as cold as a winter wind. "I hope you keep this spirit until the competition ends." Jasmine, undeterred, met the remark with equal resolve. "You as well, Ms. Whitfield," she said, tilting her head slightly as her smile remained unwavering. A subtle act of defiance that did not escape the attention of everyone around. A few moments later, as Karen drifted away and blended into the crowd of influential figures, Marcus Green approached Jasmine carrying a glass of champagne. With a slight, knowing smile, he murmured, "That went pretty well," he added with a note of concern. "Should I be worried? You seem quite adept at handling these behind-the-scenes battles." Jasmine chuckled softly, though the tension within her still lingered. "I'm not good at it, I just don't like being underestimated," she admitted quietly. Marcus studied her for a moment, and then gently handed her the champagne glass. "Well then, drink up, because tonight has only just begun." As Jasmine raised the glass and surveyed the room, she noticed the powerful figures deep in conversation, and she saw Karen standing in a group of judges, her eyes occasionally flicking in her direction. Jasmine knew the game was far from over. The Gala night was not simply a celebratory party, it was another battleground where decisions, glances, and ambiguous words could change the course of a life. She had entered the world of the powerful, a world where every move was scrutinized, and if she wasn't careful, they would do everything in their power to push her aside. Yet one thing was clear to Jasmine. She was no longer a pawn to be manipulated by Karen's cruel games. As she gently tightened her grip on the champagne glass, her eyes roamed across the lavish room filled with educators, generous sponsors, and discerning judges. Their friendly appearances belied the true power they wielded in this arena. Not everyone in the room was aligned with Karen, however. From the opposite side of the hall, a middle-aged man in an elegant tuxedo watched Jasmine with a discreet yet keen interest. As she raised the glass to her lips, he stepped forward with a calm confidence that set him apart from the ostentatious display of power around him. "Ms. Carter, may I speak with you for a moment?" His voice was steady and composed, carrying a weight that hinted at deeper intentions. Sensing that this was no ordinary conversation, Jasmine set her glass on a nearby table and nodded cautiously. "Of course, sir." The man introduced himself as Julian Washington, extending his hand with a firm, sure grip. "I am one of the judges for the competition." Jasmine paused briefly, quickly masking her surprise. The name Julian Washington was familiar. He was one of the most influential African-American leaders in education, known for having led a major policy advocacy organization before joining high-level committees. More importantly, he was one of the truly influential voices on the panel. As they moved to a quieter corner of the hall, Julian said, "I heard about your excellent performance in the qualifiers. Your score is very impressive." Jasmine kept her response measured and calm. "Thank you, sir. I just did my best." Julian offered a slight smile, his eyes brimming with wisdom as he continued, "I have been involved in many competitions in the education sector, and I have seen too many instances where genuine talent is stifled by a system that should be honoring it. I am sorry you have had to face such bias." His words resonated with Jasmine, who had long struggled against the unfair judgments imposed on her. Gathering her courage, she asked directly, "Are you referring to Karen?" Julian tilted his head, appraising her with a thoughtful look before nodding slowly. "I can only speak for what I have seen. People like her, those who do not want to see individuals like us succeed, will do everything in their power to keep us from advancing." The truth in his words cut deep, and Jasmine felt the burden of every dismissive comment and every biased decision she had encountered. Karen Whitfield was not merely a strict judge, she was a controller who believed her power could decide who had a chance and who did not. Karen had made it abundantly clear that she did not want a 17-year-old black girl who she had once dismissed without a second thought to win in front of her eyes. Julian's words affirmed Jasmine's worst fears, yet also offered her comfort. "Will you be keeping a close eye on the competition?" Jasmine asked, her eyes shining with renewed determination. Julian smiled lightly, his smile carrying a promise. "Fairness is something I have fought for my entire career. I won't let anyone manipulate it." A weight lifted from Jasmine's heart as she realized she was not alone in this fight. Julian nodded to her, then walked away, but not before giving her one last gentle reminder. "Don't let them shake you." Jasmine nodded slowly, a determined smile forming on her lips as soon as Julian disappeared into the crowd. No sooner had Julian left than Elizabeth Wells reappeared beside Jasmine, still holding a glass of champagne as if she had never left. With a knowing smile, Elizabeth remarked, "Looks like you just had an interesting conversation." Jasmine's eyes reflected a mix of gratitude and relief as she replied, "I think I just gained another ally." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow while sipping her champagne, adding, "You have more than one ally, Ms. Carter." "I won't let Karen Whitfield play dirty with you." Her words were both reassuring and defiant. "And now, I'm certain you have Julian on your side as well," Elizabeth continued. Jasmine let out a quiet sigh, feeling as though a part of the heavy pressure in her heart had been released. In that moment, she understood that while there were those who sought to bring her down, there were also those willing to protect her and stand by her side. This game was not solely in Karen's hands. Elizabeth observed Jasmine's reaction and said softly, "Remember, the path to victory is not always straight, but if you stay steady, you will reach the finish line." The gala night continued, yet Jasmine now felt bolstered by the knowledge that she had found two crucial allies in the midst of the treacherous battle. Karen remained a dangerous force, but she was not the only one with a voice on the judging panel, and Jasmine had made a firm decision. She would not let anyone take away the opportunity she truly deserved. That conviction carried her well beyond the glamorous surroundings of the gala. At dawn, before the Chicago sky had fully brightened, Jasmine awoke with a clear sense of purpose. Today was the deciding day, the final round, the last battle. Standing before the mirror, she stared at her reflection, seeing not fear but unwavering determination. This was no longer just a competition, it had become a war. Every moment of her life had led to this point, and she was resolved not to let anyone, especially not Karen Whitfield, steal victory from her grasp. As Jasmine entered the competition hall, a serious and resolute atmosphere filled the space. The other contestants shared in the pressure of the day, yet Jasmine knew in her heart that only one person truly desired to see her fail. When her eyes met the judges' table, there she saw Karen waiting, her presence a constant oppressive reminder of the bias and cruelty Jasmine had endured. The final round was unlike any previous challenge. It was not a multiple-choice test or an essay that could be objectively graded. Instead, it was a live debate that would require immediate responses, insightful analysis, and sharp counter-arguments. There were no absolute right answers in this arena. Success depended on how well each contestant defended their point of view, and Jasmine knew that this was a stage where Karen could easily manipulate perceptions. When it was finally Jasmine's turn, Karen's voice sliced through the silence as she addressed her with a tone as sharp as a knife. "Miss Carter, I have a question for you." Karen was deliberate in her speech, each word loaded with hidden meaning. "If you had the power to decide national education policy, what would you do to improve the system without affecting students who are currently performing well by today's standards?" The question was clearly designed to trap Jasmine. It forced her to choose between advocating for change that might disrupt the current system or defending a status quo that perpetuated injustice. Jasmine immediately recognized the trap but remained unfazed. She calmly took the microphone, her eyes never leaving Karen's. "Thank you for the question," she began, her tone firm yet respectful. "But I believe there is a mistaken assumption in how it was phrased. We should not view education as a zero-sum game where one group's gain necessitates another's loss. In my view, education can be improved in ways that allow every student to thrive. Rather than taking opportunities away from those already succeeding, we can expand resources to ensure quality education is accessible to all." Her response was a perfect counterattack that left little room for Karen to twist her words. In that moment, Karen could neither criticize Jasmine for seeking improvement, nor claim that Jasmine wished to harm successful students. Jasmine had skillfully broken the trap set before her in front of all the judges and contestants. After Jasmine finished her presentation, the room fell into a heavy silence before Julian Washington subtly nodded, a satisfied smile briefly gracing his face. Elizabeth Wells also acknowledged Jasmine's performance with a nod, their shared glances conveying support and solidarity. In that silence, Jasmine realized that although Karen's cruelty and manipulation had tried to control her fate, there were true allies watching. Those who believed in fairness and recognized the potential of every deserving individual. And with that realization, Jasmine Carter felt a deep sense of vindication and resolve. She knew that she would continue to fight for her rightful place, no matter how treacherous the road ahead. The battle was far from over, but with the unwavering support of her allies and her own inner strength, Jasmine was prepared to take on every challenge, determined that no one, especially not Karen Whitfield, would ever diminish her light again. Jasmine Carter stood on that stage with her eyes still gleaming with clear pride as the other judges whispered among themselves and quickly scribbled notes on their evaluation sheets. In that charged moment, Karen Whitfield tried her best to maintain a facade of calm, even though Jasmine could clearly see the tension in Karen's shoulders and the tight grip she had on the pen in front of her. Karen had fought hard to control the game, but in that decisive moment, she realized she had failed. Jasmine had not only demonstrated her brilliant intellect, but also proved that she could not be easily manipulated. Even if Karen hated the outcome, she could not deny the raw, undeniable talent that had been laid bare for all to see. When the round finally ended, Jasmine stepped off the stage with a mix of relief and fierce determination pulsing through her heart. Just outside, Marcus Green waited with his hands in his pockets and a slight smirk playing on his face. "You just did something that no one else dared to do," he said softly. "Did what?" Jasmine asked, raising an eyebrow in genuine curiosity. Marcus chuckled gently and shook his head. "You just made Karen Whitfield lose face in front of the entire judging panel." Although Jasmine managed a faint smile, she knew deep down that the battle was not over yet. The final announcement of the winner was still pending, and if Karen still wielded any power, she might try one last time to stop Jasmine in her tracks. But Jasmine was no longer afraid. She had proven herself not only in the debate but also in the face of relentless prejudice and manipulation. Now there was only one question left: would justice prevail? Seated in the grand conference room, Jasmine fixed her eyes on the stage where Richard Davenport, the head judge, stood with an envelope in his hand. The atmosphere was electric, as the entire room seemed to hold its breath. While every contestant and judge waited for that one pivotal moment, Jasmine instead directed her gaze toward the judges' table. There she saw Julian Washington, sitting with his customary steady composure, and Elizabeth Wells, whose slight, satisfied smile told Jasmine that she was not alone in her fight. And then there was Karen Whitfield. Karen sat with her hands tightly clenched on the table, her fingers tapping rhythmically as if she were calculating her next move. Her eyes did not focus on the stage. Instead, she scanned the crowd, searching desperately for someone to back her up. But all she received was silence and the heavy sense of inevitable defeat. Taking a deep breath, Richard Davenport finally smiled and began. "After an intense competition and careful evaluation by our esteemed panel of judges, we are pleased to announce the winner of this year's contest. His pause built the dramatic tension in the room, and Jasmine felt her heart pounding fiercely. "The winner is Jasmine Carter," he declared. In an instant, the room erupted in enthusiastic applause. Some of the other contestants clapped with genuine joy, and even a few of the judges nodded in approval. But at that moment, Jasmine cared for nothing more than the expression on Karen Whitfield's face. Time seemed to freeze as Karen's features locked into a mask of shock and disbelief. For a moment, it looked as though she might try to muster some retort, but instead she simply blinked slowly, trying and failing to regain her composure. The defeat was unmistakable. Karen had lost, and there was nothing she could do to change that fact now that too many witnesses had seen the fairness of the competition. Jasmine's scores were final, and her debate performance had been so outstanding that even the most stubborn critics had no choice but to acknowledge her brilliance. Slowly, with the weight of years of struggle lifting from her shoulders, Jasmine rose from her seat and walked confidently toward the stage amid the roaring applause. In that moment, she felt lighter than she had in years. This victory was not just for her. It was for every young person who had ever been underestimated, for every brilliant mind that had been dismissed because someone in power decided they did not deserve a chance. As she passed by the judges' table, her eyes met Karen's once more. Gone was the sharp, triumphant smile of their first confrontation. In its place, Karen's face was empty, a silent testament to her failure to control the outcome. Richard Davenport stepped forward and handed Jasmine the prestigious trophy and a certificate. "Congratulations, Jasmine," he said warmly, his voice filled with genuine recognition. "You've proven that talent and intellect can overcome even the most formidable challenges." Jasmine accepted the trophy with both hands, feeling the cold metal against her skin, a tangible reminder that this achievement was as real as it was hard-earned. Looking out at the audience, she saw Julian Washington smiling at her proudly, Elizabeth Wells nodding with admiration, and Marcus Green giving her a thumbs up from the back of the hall. In that moment, the feeling of victory was overwhelming, a bittersweet mix of triumph and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had finally been served. Yet even as the celebrations continued and congratulations were offered, Jasmine knew that the battle was far from over. Karen Whitfield might have lost this competition, but she was still a powerful figure who had tried so desperately to hold Jasmine down. And even though Karen's voice could no longer manipulate the outcome in this contest, Jasmine knew that the same forces of prejudice and manipulation lurked just around the corner, waiting for another opportunity. But Jasmine was no longer the timid student who had once felt crushed by the weight of biased expectations. Now, armed with this victory, she was ready to challenge the system head-on. She understood that each achievement was not the end of the journey, but rather the beginning of a much larger battle for fairness and equality. Later that day, as Jasmine stepped out of the competition hall, the Chicago sun broke through the clouds with a gentle warmth that seemed to celebrate her triumph. The cool breeze caressed her face as she clutched the glittering trophy, a symbol not only of academic excellence, but of her perseverance and the promise of a better future. Marcus Green joined her outside, his voice filled with admiration as he asked, "How does it feel to be the winner?" Jasmine took a deep breath and smiled, though her gaze grew distant as memories of the struggle surfaced. "Amazing," she said softly. "But I know this is just the beginning." Marcus nodded in agreement, reminding her that winning was one thing, but leveraging that victory to change the system was what truly mattered. The next morning, still buoyed by her hard-won success, Jasmine awoke in her hotel room with a lingering sense of exhilaration. When she checked her phone, she was stunned to find her inbox flooded with interview invitations from top universities: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, and Stanford. Each email carried a tone of respectful interest, praising her performance and inviting her for an official interview. Jasmine could hardly believe that her dream of attending Harvard, a dream nurtured through years of determination and sacrifice, was suddenly within reach. As she sat on the hotel lobby couch, eyes glued to the screen, Marcus came over and raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" he asked. Jasmine showed him her phone, and Marcus whistled in impressed surprise. "Wow, no kidding, Jasmine. These are the invites that people would do anything to get," he said with genuine excitement. "Don't you realize what you've done? You've beaten the toughest competitors in a national contest and proven your brilliance in both academics and critical thinking. These universities want someone who can truly make a difference." Jasmine swallowed hard, feeling a mix of pride and heavy responsibility. "I have to choose the right path," she murmured, and Marcus agreed, promising that she would not have to face the challenges alone. That afternoon, as they walked along the shores of Lake Michigan, the cool breeze off the water felt refreshing and hopeful. Chicago sprawled out before them, vibrant and full of possibilities. In that moment, Jasmine and Marcus talked about teaming up to push for real change in education policy. "Imagine building a movement that gives every student a fair chance, without having to fight against people like Karen Whitfield," Jasmine said, her eyes burning with determination. Marcus looked at her with a spark of excitement and said, "We both share the same goal, to change the system from the inside and create something truly transformative." Their handshake was more than a greeting. It was a promise of collaboration, a vow to stand together as allies against an unjust system. As they strolled back toward the hotel, Jasmine noticed a familiar figure off in the distance. Karen Whitfield, standing by a side street and talking to a man in a dark suit. Although Karen did not see Jasmine, the dissatisfaction on her face was unmistakable. Jasmine's heart hardened for a moment as she exchanged a determined glance with Marcus. "She still has something up her sleeve," Marcus whispered, and Jasmine tightened her grip on her bag. "Maybe," she replied quietly, "but this time I won't give her a chance." Even though the battle with Karen was not truly over, Jasmine was resolute that she would not allow anyone to diminish her victory or her future. This triumph was hers, and she intended to savor every moment of it, knowing that the struggle for justice and equality was far from finished. Jasmine Carter sat quietly by the hotel window, the late winter chill of Chicago wrapping around her as she gazed down at the brightly lit streets. Inside, everything had shifted. The fierce competition, the hard-won victory, and that bitter confrontation with Karen Whitfield still haunted her thoughts. Jasmine reflected on how, at just 17, she had been swept into a storm of challenges that forced her to confront a system that often seemed designed to keep brilliant young minds like hers down. Yet now, with recognition and a purpose greater than herself, she knew that no one, especially not a cruel figure like Karen Whitfield, could stop her from claiming what was rightfully hers. Sipping her hot tea slowly, Jasmine felt warmth spread over her tongue, easing the tension that had built up over days of stress. Across from her, Marcus Green, his arms crossed and his eyes thoughtful, broke the silence. "Do you think you've changed?" he asked gently. Jasmine placed her teacup on the table and smiled faintly as she admitted, "Yes, but not in the way I thought I would. I used to believe that being the best meant everything would naturally fall into place. I thought if I could prove my ability, no one could stop me." Marcus raised an eyebrow, and Jasmine continued, "This competition showed me that justice does not simply come from natural recognition. It has to be fought for and protected by those willing to stand up for it." Marcus nodded, his gaze gleaming with understanding as he mentioned the support of allies like Julian Washington and Elizabeth Wells. "And like you," he added with a light laugh that quickly turned serious. "You're absolutely right. Justice is not something that exists on its own. It takes real allies and real courage to claim it." As the conversation deepened, Jasmine recalled the bitter sting of Karen's malicious attempts to control every outcome. Karen had tried to manipulate results and intimidate her at every turn, but in the final round, Jasmine had shattered that control by standing up and speaking the truth. That victory was not just a title, it was a declaration that those who underestimated her would no longer hold power over her destiny. Marcus left later to prepare for his flight, leaving Jasmine with a flood of congratulatory messages from family, friends, and even strangers. One message from Elizabeth Wells stood out. "Proud of you. When you have time, reach out. We can do something bigger than this competition." Another from Julian Washington read, "This victory isn't just for you, it's for everyone who's ever been denied a chance." Each message reinforced the truth that justice must be earned and that she was not alone in her fight. Lost in thought, Jasmine opened her notebook and scribbled a simple line, "Justice never comes naturally. It must be earned." The memory of Karen's cold eyes on the plane, the cruel questions during the debate, and the final look of defeat on Karen's face had all crystallized into a powerful lesson. Now, her future was wide open, filled with opportunities to not only change her own life, but also pave the way for others. When an email notification from Harvard University admissions lit up her phone with an invitation to join the Harvard Future Leaders program, Jasmine felt her heart stop for a moment. That groundbreaking offer, promising mentorship from top professors and the chance to launch transformative projects, marked the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where she would never let the forces of prejudice or manipulation control her destiny again. Jasmine Carter had finally reached a moment that felt both triumphant and transformative. The invitation from the Harvard Future Leaders program had arrived, a document that declared not merely her acceptance as a student, but her potential to become a leader who could reshape the future. This prestigious admissions initiative was reserved only for those exceptional in academics, vision, and social impact. In other words, Harvard was not content with having another brilliant mind in its classrooms. They wanted someone who could stand at the helm of change. As Jasmine set her phone aside, a rush of emotions overwhelmed her. Every painful memory from that searing confrontation with Karen Whitfield on the plane, where Karen had sneered and demanded obedience, to the grueling, pressure-filled moments of the national competition, and finally, the bittersweet reflections after her resounding victory, had led her to this decisive moment. Sitting by the hotel window, Jasmine looked out at the brightly lit Chicago streets. The city, still bustling with life despite the lingering cold of late winter, seemed indifferent to the extraordinary battles that had been fought within its confines. But inside Jasmine, everything had changed. The struggle had sculpted her into someone far stronger than the timid girl she once was. And now she carried not just the weight of her own dreams, but also the hopes of countless others who had been sidelined by a system that prized conformity over true merit. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, her phone vibrated. It was Marcus. She answered silently, and his voice burst through the line with palpable excitement. "I bet you just got the email from Harvard," he exclaimed. Jasmine couldn't help but laugh, a sound that mingled relief with the thrill of victory. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice light yet laced with disbelief. "Because I got it too," Marcus replied. Even in his casual tone, there was a hint of that larger vision he carried, a vision that went beyond personal accolades. Marcus had always seen the bigger picture. He knew that if Harvard was scouting for future leaders, they wouldn't overlook someone with his passion either. "This is insane," Jasmine said, her excitement barely contained, but not in a bad way. Marcus chuckled softly, adding, "We've proven we deserve this, Jasmine. And now, our journey isn't just about getting into Harvard, it's about what we can do once we're inside the system. It's about opening doors for everyone who comes after us." His words resonated deeply with her. She understood at once that the fight had never been solely for personal success. Instead, it was about challenging the outdated order that tried to decide who could succeed and who must remain beneath its crushing weight. But even as she celebrated her achievement, Jasmine's thoughts inevitably turned to Karen Whitfield, the woman whose cruelty had cast a long, dark shadow over every step of her journey. Jasmine knew all too well that Karen was not one to relinquish power easily. Karen had lost the competition that day, her manipulative tactics exposed in front of a panel of judges, who could no longer be swayed by empty bravado. Yet Jasmine was acutely aware that Karen would not simply fade away. In her mind, Karen remained the personification of an oppressive system, one that believed it had the right to control who could succeed and who could not, using every tool at her disposal to maintain a biased order. Karen's venomous behavior on that cramped airplane cabin, her condescending sneers, and her relentless efforts to undermine Jasmine's potential were all etched into Jasmine's memory. Even now, the thought of Karen stirred a mixture of anger and pity, a reminder that the battle against prejudice was far from over. However, what set Jasmine apart was that she was no longer the isolated, scared girl on that flight. She now had a community of allies, a network of people who recognized the injustice of Karen's actions and were willing to stand with her. With the support of Marcus, Julian Washington, Elizabeth Wells, and countless others, Jasmine realized that her strength was magnified by those who believed in her. As she scrolled down the Harvard email one more time, her eyes fixed on the invitation to arrange a personal interview, she felt a surge of resolve. With deliberate certainty, she typed, "I am very interested in attending the interview. I look forward to meeting with you at the earliest opportunity." When she pressed send, it was as if she was sealing a pact with her future, a promise to continue fighting for justice and change. For Jasmine, the struggles of the past were not mere obstacles. They were the crucible that had forged her determination. Every moment of confrontation, every dismissive remark from Karen had contributed to her growth. Now, as she prepared to step into a new phase of her life, she understood that the fight was larger than any single competition. It was a fight against a system that tried to define worth by narrow standards. A fight against people like Karen Whitfield, who used cruelty and manipulation to maintain a status quo that denied opportunities to those who dared to dream big. The world was not lacking in people like Karen. There would always be those who believed they had the power to decide who could succeed and who could not. They would use their influence, their wealth, and their cruelty to keep the doors closed to the underprivileged and the underestimated. But the world also needed people like Jasmine, those who dared to stand up, who dared to challenge the unjust order, and who would not be confined by prejudice. Jasmine's journey had only just begun, and she was determined to use her hard-won victory as a stepping stone toward a broader mission. As the reality of her new opportunity began to settle in, Jasmine reflected on the magnitude of what was now possible. Harvard was offering her not just a chance to study among the best, but a platform from which she could spearhead initiatives that would open doors for future generations. It was an invitation to become part of a movement that would not tolerate the control and manipulation of elitists like Karen Whitfield. With every message of congratulations she received from family, friends, and even strangers, Jasmine's conviction grew stronger. Each word of praise, each acknowledgement of her talent, reinforced the truth that no one could ever take away her right to succeed. Later that evening, as the cool Chicago night wrapped around her, Jasmine sat back and allowed herself to feel the weight of all she had overcome. The memories of her painful encounters, of Karen's hateful words, and the suffocating pressure in the exam room mingled with the sweet taste of victory. But more than anything, she felt hope that the future would be different. Hope that her success would inspire others to challenge an inequitable system. With her eyes fixed on the horizon, she made a silent vow. She would use every opportunity, every ally, and every lesson learned to ensure that justice was not an abstract ideal, but a living, breathing reality. Jasmine's journey, once marked by isolation and fear, had transformed into one of empowerment and purpose. As she closed her eyes that night, she pictured a world where every brilliant mind could rise without being crushed by prejudice. And she knew that the next steps of her journey, both at Harvard and beyond, would be dedicated to making that vision a reality. The struggle against those like Karen Whitfield was not over, but Jasmine Carter was no longer afraid. With her community of allies, her own resilient spirit, and the promise of a future filled with possibility, She was ready to face any challenge. The invitation from Harvard was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one in which she would lead, inspire, and ensure that the fight for justice was never fought alone. If you were in Jasmine's shoes, how would you confront the cruelty of those who seek to control success? Share your thoughts, for every voice matters in the quest for a fairer world. Thank you for listening, and may we all find the strength to stand up for what is right.